Good evening all, and welcome. Before the video begins, I want to say thank you to everyone who entered the previous competition to win a signed print of the art from the latest Hotel Stories video. The winner is Patrick Juniper. Congratulations. Please get in touch with Creeks and Peaks to claim your prize. But without further ado, let's begin. Bars offer refuge from a hard week's work at the office, and can be a great place to meet up and chill with your friends. However, some patrons may desire more than alcohol, and may use more than charm to try and get it. So get comfortable, and let the darkness take control. A few years ago, I was working as a burlesque entertainer in a gentleman's club, and was idly sitting at the end of the bar one night, when a couple came in. Obviously that's not unusual. I had no contact with them, and thought nothing of them being there, until later. A few days after that night, the doorman handed me a piece of paper that had two names on the phone written on it: Laura and Richard. I was supposed to call one of them, so I called Laura, who told me they'd been the couple who'd been there at the bar the other night. They'd noticed me, and thought I'd be perfect in a part that Richard would be producing in a film. Would I be up for a meeting? Of course I would. Who wouldn't? I was told Richard would pick me up next night at 7, and to wear something wild. 7 o'clock came around the next evening, and I was ready in a white dress of lace with ostrich feather trim, when Richard showed up outside my building. So I went down, introduced myself, and got into the car. We agreed to go to a local bar I knew well for the meeting, but first we had to go back to his place so he could pick up some contracts he'd forgotten. So off we went. He went into the house and came back with a few manila envelopes and an open bottle of beer, a brand that I didn't drink, plus it's against the law to drink alcohol in a vehicle here. So I stuck the beer into the window well of his Jeep, and we went into the bar. At the bar he showed me what were supposedly scripts from this movie he was producing, and some contracts. It all looked pretty legit. Richard was very nice, and I was interested. I made some plans to go out later with my soon-to-be boyfriend, so I excused myself to go call him on the bar's payphone, and took my Corona that I ordered at the bar with me to the bank of phones. As a dancer, I'd been taught by the other older girls to never let your drinks out of your sight. My boyfriend wanted to go to another club, so I went back to the table where Richard was and let him know that I had to go. He didn't like that, and he tried a few different things to get me to go with him to the movie set with him, saying I could meet Mickey Rookie and check the set out. But all I wanted to do was meet my boyfriend, so I declined, took Richard's card, and left. I never heard from Richard again, but a couple of months later, the police came around to the bar I was working at. They had 2 big books of mugshots and a stack of Polaroids with them, and they wanted to talk with all of us about a predator couple who had been setting up meetings with dancers by saying they were in the film industry, then drugging and raping them. They showed me the 2 mugshot books and asked me if I saw anyone I recognized in the pictures. I immediately identified Richard and Laura. They then showed me the Polaroids, which were trophy pictures of the couple in the act of attacking the poor drugged girls, and asked me if I knew any of the victims, and where they might find them. I only knew a couple of the women in the photographs, but there were a lot that this had happened to. Richard and Laura were prosecuted. He went to jail, but she didn't, because she was from a wealthy family and she also turned witness on him. About 12 years after Richard was convicted, I saw in the newspaper that he was up for the possibility of parole. So I wrote a letter to the parole board telling this story and urging them not to let him back out, because he was a dangerous offender who should have to stay in prison for the entirety of his sentence. If I had drank that opened beer he had handed me from his jeep on the way to the meeting, I wouldn't have made it to the meeting, and would have probably ended up in that stack of Polaroids. Girls and guys, always keep an eye on your drinks. Have fun, but be careful out there. This is a traumatic encounter I had in May of 2012. It was a Saturday night, and I went out to a bar with friends. We were dancing and being obnoxious, of course, and this dude kept looking at us. I didn't pay him much mind. He was cute, but I was not in the mood to talk to some strangers. Anyway, the night progressed, and one of my friends gave him my number, without permission by the way, and he and I are no longer friends due to his disregard for anyone but himself. So, the dude texted me. Okay, I responded politely, and we ended up having some decent conversations. We had a lot of common: music taste, movie taste, general witty banter. I'm including this so you understand why I chose to go out with this stranger. 2 weeks later, we met up in the same bar. We hung out, had some beers, and he was drinking pretty excessively. My dad is an alcoholic, so that is always a red flag for me. He seemed to be handling himself well though, and a few of my friends showed up for support and potential protection. A few hours into the date, he told me how pretty I was. Ah, I thought, that's always nice to hear. We were sitting out on the deck, drinking and enjoying the evening. I hadn't yet realized my friends went into the bar, and no other patrons were outside. He didn't stop there though. This dude leaned close in my ear. I could feel the hot breath, and it was not a turn on. I could smell the shitty Bud Light on his breath, mixed with garlic or something. Then he started to whisper, "You remind me a lot of my ex." Ah, shit. I'd already been losing interest in this situation, but that feeling was growing immensely. Then he continued, "I thought she was a spy, you know, for the government. I used to have bad schizophrenia. Psychiatrists are bullshit though, so I self-medicated with OxyContin and shit." I pulled back, but his arms were around my shoulders and pulled me back. I felt my ear knock against his teeth, and my whole body grew numb with fear. This was when I noticed we're alone. "I'm gonna go use the restroom," I said. I needed out. Fight or flight kicked in, and he looked strong. "I'm not done," he said, squeezing tighter on my shoulder. "Just let me tell you this." I pushed my elbow against his ribs, casually but forcefully. I didn't want this to escalate, but I needed to get the hell out. "I really have to pee quick. I'll come right back." I put my other hand on the bench that we were sitting on, using the force to try and propel me up. This guy pulled me back down and chuckled, like it was cute or something. "Sorry," he said. "Just stay, I have something important to tell you." I remember he started rubbing my arm, like he was trying to soothe me into complacency. So I screamed loud. "Let me go, get off of me!" I screamed words I hoped would alert, and that I wasn't a drunken loudmouth. "What the hell, seriously, like what?" he asked. I remember the smell of garlic had gone away, and the alcohol was all that was left. It triggered even more panic in my eyes, as it was reminiscent of my father's alcoholic outbursts. "Ashley?" "Ashley!" I screamed out for my best friend, and still no one came. It was one of those patios that fenced in, with a large, thick metal door to get back into the bar. There were no windows to see into the bar either. I still didn't struggle physically. I worked with individuals who had severe aggression and behavioral disorders, and have been trained to believe that the more you physically fight, the more it escalates. The voices aren't so bad anymore. I medicate with alcohol now, he shouted. He didn't sound mad though, he seemed confused, like he didn't understand why I was so incredibly done with it. My ex, she may have been a spy. I stabbed her by accident. Kind of. She left me. And you look like her, and I like that, okay? I just care about you. I want to be with you. He said all these things. His voice calmed through that conversation. The smell of garlic came back, and I felt my body grow a limp in resignation. And then the door opened. A loud clunk as the metal hit the brick. Laughter. Ashley's laughter. I looked up, and Ashley's laughter stopped, her body still. "Get the bouncer," I said calmly. I'm so grateful I de-escalated situations for a living. It probably saved me from that getting any further. "Dude, let go of me." "You're still a bitch," he said. "You're gonna rot." At that point, I stood and ran, or walked fast, or did a silly slow run. I don't know. The adrenaline was pumping, and nothing seemed real. I ran towards my friend. The four of us ran into the bar right behind Ashley, who already had the bouncer with her. After I saw Ashley with the bouncer, I sat on a stool and fell apart. I was sobbing, and shaken, and heaving. The bartender gave me so many napkins to blow my nose with, eventually giving me an entire sack of them. Everyone had heard about the situation, so nobody bothered me. My friend stayed with me that night. Everything was a huge blur after I got out of his grip at the bar. I don't remember talking to the bouncer or the owner who banned him for life. I don't really remember writing the encounter in my journal or eating an entire pizza by myself, but I did. The next day, I changed my phone number immediately. I avoid the areas where the bar was located, and I really don't go out much at all. In my head, I went through the worst case scenarios, and that only escalated the anxiety from my encounter. My therapist helped a lot though, but still, dude from the bar, let's not meet. Seriously. This happened almost 2 years ago when I was 22. I live in an area outside of Pittsburgh. I was single at the time, and the only thing I wanted to do was have fun and forget about my ex. I should say that I am a very cautious person, verging on the paranoid sometimes. I've never broken a bone. I've never trusted anyone that I didn't know. I learnt my lessons very young, so I felt very equipped to go out by myself to the local bar, because I knew how to make the environment safe. I made fast friends with the bartenders, got along with the regular guys that were there, and I made it very clear to everyone that I didn't want any sort of romantic attention. I literally just wanted friends and booze. Out of all the men there, one stuck out. Phil. Phil was attractive, funny, and best of all, wasn't interested in me one bit. I had problems having male friends, as all of them always girlfriend zoned me eventually. Phil actually liked having me as a friend. Nothing else. It was awesome. We went to the local bars all the time together. I'd be his wingman, and he would be my bodyguard. When guys hung around me for too long, I wasn't interested if Phil gave a look. and he'd usher the guy away. Perfect setup. We both felt pretty safe no matter where we went, but neither of us saw this one coming. A few months into our friendship, Phil rings me and asks if I wanted to go cosmic bowling. Emphatic yes. I hadn't been since I'd been a preteen, so I was already stoked. I get ready. I did my makeup very bright and expressive. Threw on a bright blue shirt and overall shorts, black combat boots, and I'm good to go. The car that pulls up isn't Phil's. I call him cautiously and ask him who is in front of my house, and he says to come on out, that it's a few of his friends. This reassures me, and I head to the rather large Ford SUV. I sit next to Phil, and he introduces me to everyone. The man driving is Jason. His girlfriend is in the passenger seat, and there's some gross kid in a fedora and this goofy hillbilly kid. They say we were going a few towns over. That's where a bar that we're stopping at first was gonna be. And then onto the bowling. Cool, I'm up for that. We get into the bar, and it turns out Jason knows the bar owner. Then we drink for free and get a free pizza while we're at it. Can't complain about that. I went up to the front of the building for a smoke and turn around to find Jason walking up behind me. He shakes my hand and apologizes for not introducing himself properly. I said it was fine, and we made casual talk while we smoked. He expressed how much he loved my style. Burlesque rockabilly pinup is how I believe he described me. I thanked him, and he began to tell me about the gay bars he DJs at, and how his girlfriend isn't comfortable with the fact that he's bi. As a pansexual, I can relate to what he's going through. I immediately feel more at ease with him. I tended to trust men who weren't straight more, because I felt as though they were less of a threat, which was a mistake in hindsight. His girlfriend came out and seemed annoyed with me, but I treated her very nicely. As I understand, it's easy to get jealous. We've all been there. Fast forward to bowling. Phil is way too drunk and ends up getting thrown out of the bowling alley. His girlfriend comes to pick him up and apologizes that she can't take me home as well. I tell them it's okay and that I'll be safe. Jason agreed to take me home. Fast forward. Bowling is over and Jason decided to head back to the bar and have the owner reopen after hours for us. I thought it was pretty freaking rad that he had connections like that. They reopened the bar for us and Jason actually tended the bar. I sat and talked with the owner for a while whilst Jason fed me alcohol. I kept trying to refuse, but he was really convincing. "This shot tastes like a toasted marshmallow, you have to try it." And before I knew it, I was hammered. I don't remember how much, but I do remember getting home safely. And I had made new friends. Very exciting. So Jason adds me on Facebook and invites me to the gay bar the very next day. I'm excited. I'd never been to the one that he worked at, and I trusted him. The months go by and we were fast friends. I started to hang out with him without Phil. He would pick me up, I'd set up his DJ equipment at the bar and get him whatever he needed, then party the night away, and he'd take me home. Sometimes his girlfriend would be there. Sometimes she wouldn't be. She didn't seem to like me still, and all the while, I was nothing but nice to her. But it did begin to bother me. Maybe she saw something that I did not. Valentine's Day rolled around, and as I was the local single woman who hated everyone, Jason invited me to a burlesque show that he was going to be doing the lighting for. His girlfriend was going, and so was the hillbilly that was mentioned earlier. 10 minutes into the adventure, I already had to tell off the hillbilly, just because it's Valentine's Day and you're single and going to the same club does not make me your date. The show happens. It's long and eventually I get bored and head to the bar. Jason's girlfriend comes up to me and is silent. She buys 2 shots of tequila and hands me one. She clinks my glass and says, "Good luck," and we take our shots. I realised what she had said as she walked away and thought it odd, and the hillbilly drives me home. I wake up with 46 missed calls, 20-something texts from Jason. I call him, concerned. He doesn't seem upset. He says he just wanted to talk to me, that maybe he had a few too many drinks, and that he was sorry. Okay, I guess, no big deal. He wanted me to come help him take the lights out of the club. I agreed. He picked me up, and something seemed off, but I couldn't place it. His face looked haggard. He talked like his emotions were stretched too thin. We get to the club, and it's locked. He called the owners, and they said that they would be there soon, within the hour. He seems very agitated, and doesn't even want to get out of the car to walk around to the shops. He then ignores my attempts at conversation and calls someone on the phone, an EMT who he's acquainted with. He's asking him for things to steal from the ambulance. It started off innocent enough. Gauze, bandages, tongue depressors, and eventually, "Do you still have those leather restraints for mental patients? Do you guys have scalpels on the ambulance? One of those big needles, like the huge syringes. What about those pads that soak up fluid? Like the ones you put under patients that are bleeding? The full body ones." The phone was on speaker. I could hear the tension in the man's voice. He told him no to each request, and was getting more and more nervous at this bizarre back and forth. Eventually the man hung up on Jason. I sat there, trying not to seem too conspicuous, and he screamed in my face, "What is your problem now?" I smiled and said nothing was wrong, trying to diffuse whatever was going on with my friend. He laughed nervously and apologized. He said he had a rough Valentine's Day, and he was trying to get stuff for his friend's performance art piece and wasn't having any luck. I trusted him. After we took down the equipment, he took me to the gay bar, and one of the male strippers took a liking to me. Long story short, I may or may not have made a poor life choice that night. Anyway, the bar closes and Jason isn't talking to me. We get into his car and drive a little down the road, and he explodes. "What the hell? How could you do this to me, Alice? How could you?" He started to cry, swerving all over the road. "Don't you have any self-respect? Any respect for me?" I told him to mind his own business and pull over. I'm walking home, and if he were to follow me, I would call the police. I took up my phone and dialed 911, but didn't press send. Everything finally made sense, that this was not a person who is my friend, and it's time to be strong and fight. He pulls over and lets me out, silently, and drives off. I call my father for a ride, and he picks me up and asks what happened. I'm not a personal human. I'm not good at sharing. I only told my father that if a man with awful sideburns shows up at the door, bring a gun. Fast forward, I went to another bar with Phil. He was very protective of me after the incident, never leaving me out of sight for long. I walked to the bathroom, which was down a dark hall at this particular establishment. and felt someone latch onto my arm. Jason. Internally, I was furious and scared, but on the outside, I did my best to remain calm. He looked dead inside, nothing in his eyes, just blank. I left Chrissy for you, Alice. I did. You did this to me, but that's okay, really, because we're going to be fine now. You can also sleep with whoever you want. I know how you are, and it doesn't matter if girls or guys or whatever. I'm sorry. I let it get to me before. You're just so amazing. I don't want to lose you. It's okay. It is. You can treat me like garbage if you have to. If it's what makes you happy. We're going to be together now. Yes. You're perfect. I've always liked winter weddings. I let the rage get the better of me, and with as much venom in my voice as I could manage, I snarled, "No, I am not your girlfriend. I am not, never have been, and never will be attracted to you. You need to let go of me now, you pathetic sack of shit." He blinked and squeezed tighter, and began to try and drag me towards the door. "We're going to Florida now, and there's nothing you're going to be able to do about it." The next thing I know, I fell to the ground with him, and he let go. Phil was on top of him, beating the piss out of him. After he was satisfied, I took him by the shirt and dragged him out the door. The bartender helped me up. A few guys gathered around me and tried talking me to calm me down. Some even apologized that they didn't see the confrontation in the hallway go down. I didn't call the police, because I was thinking straight, and I didn't want Phil to get into trouble for beating him within an inch of his life. I don't go out much anymore. I am a girl, and was 22 at the time. This story takes place in early January, in Madison. Madison is notorious for its drinking culture, boasting the famous kilometer-long State Street, which is basically one long, uninterrupted series of bars. It links the university library to the state capitol. I had parked my car near the library and met up with some friends. We ended up at this bar right next to the capitol, where we ran into many old high school classmates. My friends decided to leave earlier, but an old former friend asked me if I could give him and his older brother a ride back. I agreed, so I waited for him to finish his drinks so that we could go. I waited and waited and waited for about 20 minutes. About 10 minutes until the bar closed at 2 a.m. He tells me he's getting a ride from someone else instead. I'm pissed, but don't show it and walk off. Now, I have to make my way back to my car, while all the drunks exit the bars, hollering at any girls they see. There's an icy wasteland between me and my car. So I bundle up and start walking briskly down State Street. Catcalling, jeering, crude propositions. I'm practically jogging at this point. Suddenly, this guy catches up to me and starts trying a conversation mid-jog. He asks me my name, where I live, what I'm doing, and all manner of inappropriate questions. I get super weird vibes and try to shake him, but he follows me until near the end. I realize that the very last bar is coming up, before I have to round a corner to get to my car, where we would all have been alone. I made a ballsy decision. I made eye contact with a pair of built, yet non-creepy looking guys and went right up to one of them and threw my arms around him, exclaiming, "Oh my god, Andy, I haven't seen you in forever, how have you been?" This guy was confused at first, but mid-hug I whispered, "Help me," in his ear, So he played along, and after about a minute of ad hoc dialogue, the creeper retreated. Once he was gone, I thanked the guys and said goodnight, and made my way back to my car. If I hadn't had the courage to approach the two random guys and ask for help, I don't know how that night would have ended up. I had just moved to a small resort town and was living in staff accommodation at a hotel where I was employed as a chambermaid. All of the cleaning staff were women. The owner only wanted females living in staff accommodation. We weren't even allowed to have men over to our quarters. I'd moved away to escape from a possessive ex-boyfriend, which is really another story in of itself. And I was 19, and had lived a fairly sheltered life due to controlling boyfriends and an overprotective mother. So I was quite naive. I'd never been to a bar before, so when my co-workers invited me to one nearby, I was excited and went along. It was Friday, and the bar was full of people. A rather attractive man approached me, and we started up a conversation about paranormal stuff and religion. Right up my alley. He too had moved there for work. He was a cook, and was given a room in the hotel he was working at, which happened to be only a minute away from the bar. Our conversation was quite interesting, and he seemed nice, and the bar was starting to get rowdy. So when he invited me back to his place to talk, I said sure. This was incredibly stupid, I realize now. As soon as he opened the door to his room, he was trying to get me into his bed. It hadn't been apparent before how drunk he was, but suddenly he could barely form a coherent sentence and was slurring and mumbling all over the place, posing on his bed like Kate Winslet in Titanic, though with his clothes on, thankfully, and drunkenly inviting me to join him. I got the hell out of there. I reconnected with my co-workers at the bar. One was talking to a tall man, and she introduced me to him, saying he was a friend of hers, before leaving us to go onto the dance floor. We talked for some time, and I felt safe with him, because he was a friend of my co-workers, and he offered to give me a ride home. Before you start thinking that I'm completely naive, I should mention that in this town, there was only one taxi. The driver of the taxi was known by the townspeople to molest his fares, to the point where almost every woman, and a few men, who had lived there a few years had a story about him. Also, my co-workers were all hammered, so my options were 1. Late night driving on a windy road with a drunk driver. 2. Riding with a taxi driver who will likely sexually assault me. 3. This guy. And 4. Walking home alone 6 kilometers through forested areas with bears and cougars. Option 3 seemed like my best bet. As we went to his car, I started telling him about the guy before, gauging his reaction. He was sincerely upset for me about it, which made me feel more confident in him. If he was a creeper, he'd be making excuses for the guy, right? He invites me over to the house he's staying at, saying that it sounds like I've had a rough night, and he's not trying to hit on me. It's just that the people he's house setting for have an amazing home theatre and a ton of movies, and that we could watch something good. I'm pretty keyed up from the night, so movies sound like a good idea to me, and I go along with him. We get in, and he shows me the living room. There is a big, awesome home theatre, and a huge crate full of DVDs. Pick whichever one you want, he says. I browse through the collection. There is a lot of romantic comedies, but I worry that if I choose one of them, he'll think I'm coming on to him. I grabbed Silence of the Lambs instead, because not a sexy movie, and also I've never seen it. Right at the point where Hannibal Lecter is talking about eating someone's liver with fava beans, the guy puts his hand up my skirt, because, I don't know. I am supposed to be hot and bothered by cannibalism or something. I guess I may as well have picked a romantic comedy, for all the good of picking horror movies did me. My memory of the rest of the night is pretty hazy. I got him off me, he chased me through the house. It was under construction, so there were big, thick plastic sheets hanging from the walls. It was a large house that I wasn't familiar with, so I had no idea how to get out, and I didn't know the town well enough to get myself anywhere, but lost once I did. We were on a tiny road off another tiny road off another tiny road in the middle of the forest. Basically, I ran and he chased me. Eventually, I found myself in a bedroom that had a door that locked. I locked it and leaned against the door crying, as he pounded on the other side of the door yelling. After a while, something weird came over me. I opened the door and demanded that he take me home. "Oh yeah, I'll take you home tomorrow," he said. "No, you will take me home now." I don't think I've ever used that tone of voice before or since. I don't think I could do it again if I tried. Somehow, with those 7 words, I managed to instill enough fear into him that he immediately took me home in his car. It was a messed up night. When I went to work the next day, I found out that my co-worker wasn't actually friends with the guy in the first place. She'd never met him before. She was just trying to flirt with him. Idiot. I lived in Germany for about 4 years recently because of the military. I enjoyed it a lot. It was something not a lot of people my age would be able to experience. One night, during the German Christmas festivals, I went bar hopping with my twin brother. I am a friendly looking girl, and I make friends easily. Oftentimes, I've been told by strangers that I am a charming person. When I drink, I become even more of a social butterfly. Well, that bites you in the ass when you're an unassuming girl, especially in a foreign country. So after about the 3rd bar of the night, me and my brother were getting fairly drunk. It was cold outside and snow was falling. The night was pretty nice, and I was really enjoying myself. We went to our, unknowingly, last bar for the night, and sat at the front. There was this old Middle Eastern European man, about 40 to 50 years of age, who was sitting next to me. At first he was quiet, but eventually he spoke up and offered to buy me drinks. I was drunk and running out of money, so of course I said yes. He didn't touch any of the drinks. They were just handed over directly by the bartender, so I knew nothing could happen to them. My brother and him started talking after a minute, and the man kept leaning closer to me, grinning and telling me he was royalty in his country. I just thought he was drunk, so I'd humoured him and told him it was cool. I asked him what he was doing in Germany, but he never specified. Eventually, he started leaning against me, patting my leg, my arm, acting like we were good friends. I was getting uncomfortable at this point, and even noticed the bartender was keeping an eye on him. Eventually, the man asked us if we smoked weed. My brother, drunker than I, answered yes right away, and the man was delighted. He said to us, "Look at me," that he could take us on his private jet to his country and have a party. That he said The best stuff we'd ever had would be there. Thankfully, my brother wasn't drunk enough not to notice this really strange situation. We laughed it off and said we can't leave the country, but the man persisted. He kept looking at me and telling me that I was his best friend and that his country was beautiful, and getting more and more handsy. At this point I stopped drinking, because when a strange man is feeding you alcohol and talking about taking you on his private jet, you stop taking the alcohol. The man pulled out his passport and showed it to us, saying something about how we could leave right now. That was enough for my brother to spring into action. My brother patted the guy on the shoulder and said, "Sure, but we need to use the bathroom." He looked in the eye, and I knew it was time to go. So I nodded and was like, "Yep, gotta pee, we'll be back." The man said, "We better be." My brother and I walked casually to the back of the bar and left through the emergency exit and found a cab home. So weird guy at the bar, let's not meet again. For some background, I was a 22-year-old female at the time. It was the day after Valentine's Day, and I just found out the guy I was seeing was cheating on me. A coworker and I decided to grab some drinks at our favorite bar after work. We dropped my car off at home, which was 5 minutes away, and she drove. We were having a great time, and this cute guy was sitting near us and seemed to be alone. Figuring how I was newly single, I figured I'd chat him up. He was nervous and seemed shy, and we invited him to sit over with us. He was a bit socially awkward, but he seemed harmless. We got to talking about what we did for work. He told us he was a parole officer and also helped the local police at times. He had loosened up and seemed alright. So after a while, my coworker wanted to leave, and the guy said he should give me a ride to my apartment. I was a bit uneasy, but I did only live round the corner, and he did seem nice. So she left, and we continued talking. All of a sudden, his face turned into what I can only describe as shit your pants scary, as he proceeded to tell me that I needed to be careful, because there was a serial rapist they were looking for. "Oh, okay, thanks," I said as I thought. Well, shit. I thought I'd certainly be safe with this shy, nervous, and socially awkward guy who didn't seem to fit the job he'd just done telling me he did, as he told me about some rapist on the loose with this shit your pants scary look on his face. So instead of listening to my alarm bells, I took him up on the ride home. I was too drunk to walk, and cell phones didn't exist. So I thought, okay, it's 5 minutes. We get to my apartment, and I get out of the car, and he asks me if he can use my bathroom. I tell him no, my roommate is there, and I don't bring people in that she doesn't know. He keeps asking and getting irritated, and my alarm bells are going off, and they are screaming at me to get the hell away from him. The front door to the complex is locked, and you have to be buzzed in, or you're shit out of luck. I take my key and have it ready to go so I can quickly unlock the door. At this point I decide to make a run for it, full on sprint mode, like I'm Jackie Jockner Kersey. I caught him off guard and had the good head start from him, and he begins to chase me. I shoved that key into the door and slammed it shut behind me and booked it up the stairs as if my life depended on it. I could hear him banging on the door as I got to the stairs. I ran all the way up the 5 flights of stairs, ran into my apartment and locked the door, then cried as my roommate stared at me in horror. I didn't leave the apartment for 4 days, and I realized he was likely the serial rapist he was talking about in his own story, and I never returned to that bar again. I am a 27-year-old male. This happened to me when I was in 5th grade, so I was about 11 years old. The whole idea of pedophiles and kids being abducted wasn't a huge publicized deal back then. Well, at least, not as much as it is now. But we lived above a bar that was very busy every night. Most of the people were nice, and sometimes they would buy us cans of pop or something. But nothing weird or dangerous ever went on, at least that I'm aware of. We lived on a busy street though, so we weren't really allowed to leave the block, unless we went over my elementary school across the street. So most of the time, we were stuck out in the backyard. So I'm 11, my brother Josh is 9, and my cousin Crystal was 11 as well. We were trying to play hide and seek, but it was limited. We were sort of used to the bar customers coming out of the back door and going to their car or vice versa. Nobody ever said more than hi though, and left us alone. Well, one chick, who was probably in her 40s, comes up and asks her what we're doing. We tell her we're playing hide and seek and that it was my brother's turn. Well, my brother was very small for his age due to lead paint, so he looked like he was 5 or 6. So she comes over, picks him up, and puts him in an empty trash can. This was one of those with the lid and the locking handles. We are freaking out trying to get him out, and ended up having to know the trash can over since neither of us were tall enough to lift him out. We run back upstairs screaming from my mother, and we tell her what happened. Well, my neighbour's daughter Carrie was there, and I was madly in love with this girl, or infatuated, whatever, but I had a crush on this girl for a long time, and here she was with her mom talking to mine. She was 16 at the time, I think, and man was she pretty. Anyway, so we decided to play in the entry room to the apartment instead. It had the doors to each apartment and was basically a large laundry room. A couple of hours go by, and all of a sudden, this bitch shows up again out of nowhere. Apparently, she made note of us going back upstairs and remembered it later in her drunken stupor. Josh and Crystal run inside, but when I got up I twisted my ankle, and so this chick grabs me by the arm and tries to pull me out the door. My neighbour comes running out, and her daughter grabs my other arm and starts pulling. So I got a drunk chick trying to haul my ass out the back door for no apparent reason, and my childhood crush trying to save my life. It was like magic. Carrie pulled my arm and made this chick stumble, and then punched her in the mouth as hard as she could. Next thing I knew, I got Carrie with her arms around me, trying to comfort me. So it wasn't all bad. But anyway, I still had to go to the doctor because my arm was all screwed up. The next week, this chick came by with the police, and apparently had a much different story to them, and somehow thought that Carrie and I were going to be paying for her hospital bills, but that she wouldn't press charges. Well, there were 3 kids, a teenager, and 2 adult witnesses that told the cops a different story about a drunk woman trying to adopt a kid. The tone of the conversation changed, and I was taken down to the station with my mum and stepdad, so I could answer all the questions. After that, I don't remember anything coming of it. But hey, my childhood crush turned into the Xena warrior princess that I love, and heroically saved my ass. This happened a few years back in February. I was at a local bar with a few friends having a few drinks on a Friday night. I felt tired, and it was about 2 AM, so I decided to walk home alone. My house is about 15 blocks from the bar. It's not a good neighborhood, but I'm a big guy of 6'3" and was kind of tipsy, so I didn't think much of it. As I was walking, I could see a girl running into the streets and fall over. There's a man running up from behind her and grabs her as she was fighting back, so obviously I knew something bad was up, so I better find out what was going on. As I get closer, I could see them better. The girl was an Aboriginal woman in her late 20s. She was pretty from what I could see, but also messed up. I wasn't sure if she were high or drunk or drugged, but she really couldn't walk or talk on her own without falling over. She also didn't have a coat on. This is Canada in the winter, so you need your coat or you are in trouble. The man, I suspect, was close to his 60s. Short, white, fat, weird-looking guy. He was grabbing this girl. The man dragged the woman onto the sidewalk off the streets, and she was sloppily trying to fight him. I walked up to him, asking him to tell me what was going on, and he said something like, "I found this girl on the street, and she is going to freeze without a coat or get run over by a car. So I'm trying to bring her back to my place to keep her warm. Can you help me bring her back because she's going to have trouble walking?" As he was talking to me, the girl got up. She stumbled over me and grabbed onto me super tightly. So tightly it hurt. Then she said something to me in gibberish. She couldn't talk, but I could tell she wanted to get away from this guy. My creep meter was already at 110%, and a creepy guy wanting me to bring a drunk or drugged girl to his place when she doesn't want to have anything to do with him is obviously a big red flag. I thought I'd better do something about this. So I told him no, I don't think I'm going to help him bring her back to his place. I told him I'm going to call the cops instead and they can deal with it. He got upset with me and was telling me I shouldn't call them. He said his place is close, why bother the cops? And that they would take forever when she was going to freeze or run into the street. He said a few more excuses like that and kept on repeating them. So obviously I ignored him and called the police. I said where we were and that we needed someone to pick up this girl. Before I finished the call, the creepy guy was bugging the girl more, so she took off as best she could, kind of falling and getting back up and falling. I followed her. I kept telling the creepy guy to stop bugging her and leave her alone, but he kept following too. I stayed on the phone with the police to give them updates to our location as she ran, for about a few blocks, and the while the creepy guy was still trying to talk and help him get her to his place. The creepy guy finally realizes that my assistance was never going to happen, so he grabs her again and starts to pull her, and she tries to fight back. Before I can do anything, the cops pull up, sees the two of them struggling in the street, and I inform them that they can now deal with this and walk away. As I walk, I hear the creepy guy telling the cops that they need to help him bring her back to his place, and they respond like he's a rapist, which he very well may have been. My mother recently told me this, that when I was around 5 years old, living in a small town in Saskatchewan, Canada, she decided to go out to the bar with one of her close friends, Auntie Mandy. Anyway, they go out and are having a good time and everything, and this guy comes up to them and started talking and flirting with them a bit. They both made it very clear that they were married with children, and the guy backed down but insisted to buy them shots. Not wanting to be rude, they had a few, but eventually turned down more because they both had to drive home. I guess at some point after that, he kind of disappeared. When it was time to go home, Mom and Auntie Mandy walked out into the parking lot, hugged, and went their separate ways. Their cars were apparently on opposite sides of the parking lot, and it was rather large. So Mom locks the car and gets in, and the guy from earlier comes out of nowhere and hops into the passenger side seat. He insisted that she go to a party with him, and my mum, who didn't want to anger him, went along with it. They then started driving, and at some point he said he needed to stop at the liquor store on the way, so she stopped. As soon as he got out of sight in the store, she hit the gas as hard as she could, and as it was the middle of winter, she was just spinning her wheels instead of going anywhere, but thankfully managed to get out of there before he came back. She said that he was probably just really drunk and wanted to get laid or something, but he seemed pretty sober and he creeped her out. So man who decided to hop in my mum's car after the bar, I hope that you never meet her again. Hey guys, it's Mort here, and thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed the video, please remember to give it a big thumbs up and consider hitting that subscribe button and the little bell icon for even more scary stories every day. Don't forget that if you'd like me to read your story on my channel, feel free to send it to my email or share it to my Reddit, which is of course available in the description. Just please make sure to include as much punctuation, descriptive language, and paragraphing as possible. Especially paragraphing, because a lot of submissions miss it out and it makes it so much easier to read. But anyway, for now guys, I'm going to sign off. Stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next one.